gamers, I'm gonna a sub DPS and a main DPS, and 2 supports and a main DPS, which will vary on, you know, what playstyles you like. If you have like one super OP character you want to just keep buffing up, or you know, whatever you want to go ahead with, or what characters you have. So before I start rambling on like I've already have, there's 3 rules you really have to follow. The first one you have to take into account is the buffs that your characters are providing. The second one is the kit that the character has. The third one is the rotation that you will be doing. Now, to start it off, I know I'm making weird noises. To start it off, the way that I like to play is I like to start with my 1. I go over to 3, 2, 1. So you'll see I'll go here, back to the very end, and then we'll just keep rotating like that. I just like starting at 1 because that's my main DPS. I like to pepper him up a little bit before I switch over to my my last one and then start the rotation again there. So first, let's look at a common play style of 1 main DPS with 2 supports and see how that team is built. Now, I have Jing Yuan. Ignore the levels. This is just for, reference purposes. Now, he's my main DPS, obviously. We got my support here, and we got Mortefi here, Ballin Mortefi as my sub DPS sort of support role going on. Now, the first thing I want you to pay attention to, like I was saying before, buffs. If you go over to view outro skills, this is going to be one of the most imperative things to increase your level and to continue to increase your level. This is what changes this game from Genshin. This is the thing that pushes them apart, and that's because whenever you play the character long enough, you do certain abilities, you dodge certain attacks, you get counters off, you just play the game, you will level up a concerto meter, and once that concerto meter is max, you'll be able to get an outro effect. Now, almost all the DPS characters I can think of, main DPS characters, will have just a damaging outro effect, which is completely fine. That's good. That's like a final hurrah to keep the DPS going before they're, fully off the field. Supports are going to have a sort of buffing effect, and a sub DPS is kind of up in the air. Most of the time it's going to be a support kind of role for the next unit, but we're in early game stages. That could all change. So the way that this rotation is going, Jing Yuan, we have him going out, he does his damage, we switch over to Healer Girl. Now she does her healing and all that. Now we go over to this, which shows that the outro skill is a buff that heals a character for her max HP for 30 seconds every 3 seconds. So regardless of who is on the field, it will continue to heal that character. Now, she has other avenues of healing. We don't even have to pay attention to the bottom one, but we have other avenues of healing that she has on the character, but this is just a nice thing to keep in mind. So this is a buff. We go over to Mortefi, which Mortefi has a buff right here, which buffs our heavy attack damage by 38%. That's a pretty nice, juicy number. And that lasts for 14 seconds. Now, the main thing you need to focus when it comes to reading these outro skills is the first line. The next character. That is extremely important. All right, so this says the next character, but down here it says it lasts for 30 seconds. So regardless of who you switch, it goes over to each character, and it just lasts at an extended amount of time. But the next character is the only one that's going to receive this buff. And that means if you switch off that character, they're no longer going to receive that buff anymore. Okay, so that's why he is second in the role. That's why we're going from Jing Yuan to the healer. So Jing Yuan takes a little bit of damage, go to the healer, heal him up. Then we go to Mortefi, who gives a ult that passively just deals extra damage while he's off field, which is really nice. So we pop that ult. Then when we switch with the outro, our next character, Jing Yuan, which is our main DPS, is going to have bonus damage by 38%, and he's going to have that for 14 seconds, and he's going to have Mortefi's damage dealing effects from his ultimate going on until that ends. So that's really important to pay attention to those things. Now, I'm going to be showing you something a little weird here, okay? It's going to be a little weird team comp. this. So how this is especially weird because if we first go to the outro skills, you see DPS, right? This is going to be, you know, more Teffy again, but this one is also a buffer and it only lasts for the next character and it only lasts for 14 seconds. So how are we going to do this? It's two of these are just going to be the next character buff and that's about it. Well, it depends then on your playstyle and how much you seem to be taking damage, because shielders, especially this one, it's only going to really last for the next character that you put on the field. So really our main DPS is going to get peppered. He's just going to keep getting peppered until he's dead, and that's a bit of a problem. Now you have to take in mind the character's kit next. So the character's kit, this character has a gun, so he's far range. This character has a sword, a heavy sword, so she's slow. And we got this guy who's basically a skill spammer. Since this guy spams skills, we got down here, this increases our resonant skill damage for 14 seconds. So that seems to be a little bit more juicy than the heavy attack here, okay? So we're gonna be wanting this one more, and not just for that deepen effect, for that outro. If we go over to the, let me go over to this details. If we see this right here, I also have this set on her. Now this set isn't one that I would put on Mortefi because it's going to drop his damage down, but this set on her is going to help our next unit out as well, because she's going to get bonus energy regen and she's going to get bonus outro skill, or when you use the outro skill, which gives that, you know, 14 seconds of bonus skill damage, you're also going to increase the attack of the next resonator. So we have 2 buffs on her. Not only that, I believe it is paramount, if you're going to run this set, this is going to be the bird you're going to be using 100% of the time until they make something better. Because read down here, once the attack hits an enemy, restores current character's resonance energy, increases the next character's damage dealt. So that means this singular character is going to have 3 forms of buffs that she's going to be able to give to the next unit. And since we have her here, we're going to be moving her right over here. So now in the rotation, we have him. We switch over to Mortefi. Mortefi is going to make it to where our next character, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, our support character doesn't have their damage fall off quite as hard because he buffs heavy attacks, and she is wanting to use a heavy attack in order to get her shields up, because if you don't know, you use a heavy attack, it's parries, and then you get your shields up for the next character that way. And another thing to take in mind, this character uses a gun, okay? So since he uses a gun, he's going to be a lot further away from the combat. So whenever he is further from the combat, you have a lot more time in order to react to enemies that are attacking you. So he is less likely to take damage because of that. Since he's not as close, he has more time to react to those attacks. So he's going to take less damage. You won't need a shield on him because he won't lose health. So he's mostly there so that our next character doesn't deal like substantially less damage, and lessens the impact of us not being able to have like another DPS there. So we could also do, in that instance, we could also do this. So this is just a nice thing for an extra little layer of DPS during our rotation. It's going to be less DPS for our main unit here, but it's just a nice little thing to pepper in, since she is a, you know, she has distance from the character, from the enemy. She's going to be able to do her damage without taking any damage herself, and without having to use, you know, her in the back of it for the shields, which I keep going back to. Now she's going to switch onto the field. She's going to buff. Then she's going to switch off, and our next character, Cappuccino here, is going to be able to do like a lot of damage because of that rotation. If we had it here, if we had it this way instead, where it's like our past is like this setup, because we didn't take into account buffs and rotations, We're gonna have Cappuccino here go. He's gonna do his DPS. Oh no, yeah, there it is. The Moonlight Cloud set. If we had another character with that set and that bird, which I had in the beta, then you're going to hit absurd amount of damage. You're going to hit like over 2 times the amount of damage that you would normally do because you fine-tuned your rotation to such a degree that your actual final DPS is going to destroy. All right, just keep that in mind. The first thing you need to focus on is the character's buffs. How's the buffs going to be procced? Is it next character? Is it lasting for a long period of time? First thing you want to pay attention to, and the first place you want to look for that is outros, because that's going to be the thing that you can't change. You can change relics and stuff, you can change echoes, but you can't change the outros, so just pay attention to that. Next, you're going to want to pay attention to how those characters rotate. All right, so how am I going to set this team up? And while you're paying attention to how the characters are going to rotate in your team comp, you want to look at the characters' kits and how they are going to be utilized in that rotation. So if Mortefi was a sword wielder instead of a gun, gunslinger, I wouldn't have him on my team at that moment because he's going to be taking too much damage for my shielder to be able to shield both units at the same time, and she doesn't heal, so I mean, yeah. So that is just something to look out for. Now, that is how you build the perfect team comp, regardless of who you have. Thank you guys for coming and watching. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments down below. Yeah, Johnny.